He didn't just want to be the best boxer in the world. He wanted to be seen, to shine. Even outside the ring, Muhammad Ali made a point of fighting for something, his own identity. Before the world called him the greatest, Muhammad Ali was already a boy thirsting for prominence. At a time when black people were taught to hide, he wanted to be the opposite, a living reflection of greatness. Winning wasn't enough. He wanted to be remembered. His passion for flashy clothes, vibrantly colored suits, and extravagant details wasn't just vanity, it was a declaration of war against invisibility. While other athletes hid behind neutral uniforms, Ali paraded silk suits, shiny shoes, and boldly printed shirts that seemed to scream, "I exist, and I'm not going to ask permission." In the 1960s and 1970s, the world saw him as a phenomenon in the ring, but outside it, his style was seen as provocation. Every colorful tie, every velvet jacket was a silent affront to a system that said men like him should be content to be just fighters. But Ali never wanted to just fight. He wanted to tell his own story. His elegance was the cry of a man who refused to be reduced to the strength of his fists. And behind this brilliance lay a truth. Every suit was armor, and every color, a flag of resistance. Fashion, for Ali, was more than appearance. It was identity. It was politics. It was a visual punch to prejudice. He knew that when he walked into an event wearing a gold suit, he was sending a message. I am free. I am king, and no one will tell me otherwise. And the curious thing is that, over time, the world that called him exaggerated finally surrendered. His clothes, once ridiculed, became a symbol of confidence and power, and today, decades later, his style still echoes in the fashion halls, as a reminder that true luxury is being true to who you are. Before Muhammad Ali was the man who wowed audiences with his luxurious clothes. He was just Cassius Clay, a skinny kid from Louisville, Kentucky, with a dream disproportionate to his size. He grew up in a neighborhood marked by racial segregation, where even the mirrors seemed to reflect boundaries. The store windows displayed elegant suits, neatly pressed shirts, and shiny shoes. But those objects seemed to belong to another world, a world that told him, "This isn't for you." And it was precisely this silent sentence that he vowed to defy. From an early age, Ali understood that every vibrant color, every distinctive piece he wore, was a way of protesting against what the system tried to impose. While other boys dreamed of buying their first car, he dreamed of wearing his first tailored suit. He imagined himself walking the streets with the same poise as the movie stars he saw on local theater posters, but without having to imitate anyone. He wanted to be himself, bigger than any standard. He was often seen standing in front of cracked mirrors, adjusting the imaginary collar of an outfit he couldn't yet afford. One day, Cassius, "You'll wear whatever you want, and no one will be able to tell," he would mutter to himself. With the same determined look he would display years later in the ring. But the road to glory would be long and sweaty. Boxing entered his life by chance, when a stolen bicycle took him to a police gym. Inside, the smell of sweat and leather mingled with the dry sound of blows on the sandbags. That rough, simple, and masculine environment seemed the opposite of everything he admired, but it was there that he realized, if he wanted to wear silk, he would first have to sweat blood. He trained for hours without rest, but always with style. "It's not enough to win, you have to win beautifully," he would say, as he combed his hair before stepping into the ring. For Ali, even sweat had to look elegant, and when he began to attract attention with his first knockouts, style was already part of the spectacle. He didn't just win, he performed. He arrived at training wearing colorful shirts, tight pants, white belts, and sunglasses. The older guys laughed. "Cassius, this is boxing, not a parade," they said, and he responded with a defiant smile, "If the world is going to look at me, let them look at me properly." That confidence, or arrogance, as some called it, made him a magnet. The cameras loved him, the critics hated him, and he knew how to use it to his advantage. The more they judged him, the more he dressed to disturb. Every suit he wore was a message. He didn't need crowns to look like a king. When he paraded in shimmering fabrics and impossible to ignore hues, he was saying something deeper than fashion. He was asserting his humanity in a country trying to erase it. In a society where black men were forced into neutrality, Ali chose scandal, and every bright color of his outfit was a blow against the gray of oppression. He didn't want to be remembered just for his quick hands, but for the visual impact of his presence. Style had become his most silent weapon, and the world hadn't yet realized how much that brilliance would transform him into a legend. But this apparent vanity hid something else. Fear. The fear of becoming invisible again, of being just another nameless fighter. And behind the expensive suits and the provocative smile, There was the boy from Louisville who still saw the stores through the window. A boy who, even with his body covered in silk, still heard the voices of the past whispering that he didn't belong there. And that was why he never stopped fighting inside and outside the ring, because deep down, Muhammad Ali knew the shine on his clothes was merely a reflection of the struggle he waged every day. A struggle not against opponents, but against oblivion, and it was there, amidst punches and suits, that the most challenging figure in world sport was born. A man who, even before winning the belt, had already earned the right to be seen. Muhammad Ali was never content with just being a champion. When the cameras rolled, he transformed the simple act of walking into a press conference into a spectacle. The impeccable suit, the shine on his shoes, the silk handkerchief tucked into his jacket pocket, everything had intention. He didn't wear clothes. He wore meaning. He was the reflection of a mind that understood the power of image. He knew that the world remembered not just who won, but who made the mark. Each bold color combination was a visual declaration of freedom, and, more than anything, a direct challenge to the standards that dictated how a black man should behave. Behind the scenes, this choice was met with surprise. Promoters, accustomed to discreet athletes, were uncomfortable. "Cassius, you're exaggerating. This distracts people from your fight," they would say. He would smile and reply, "That's exactly what I want. For them to look, for them to pay attention, for them to know who I am before I even step into the ring." This was his invisible strategy, to control the world's gaze. If he couldn't change the system overnight, at least he could choose how the world would see him within it. And the way he found was to shine so brightly that no one could ignore him. During his trips to fights, Ali transformed airports into catwalks. Photographers thronged to capture the star, arriving in velvet suits, wide hats, and sunglasses that reflected the flashlight. He walked with the bearing of a king, even when there was no throne. The audience watched him with admiration and amazement. Some called him arrogant, others a genius. But the truth was simple. Ali understood that confidence is the most powerful garment anyone can wear, and he wore it every day, sewn into each colorful suit. Once, after an interview in New York, a reporter confronted him. "Ali, why do you always dress like a movie star? You're a fighter, not a model." He responded with a calm smile, "Because I'm not just a fighter, I'm a star, and every star needs to shine. The ring is just part of my stage." This response made the rounds in the newspapers and reinforced his image as a man who understood the spectacle of his own existence. He didn't just step into the ring to fight, he transformed the ring into a theater, and the entire world into an audience. But this image of self-confidence hid deeper layers. Every expensive suit, every gleaming piece of jewelry was also a form of protection. There, he wore vanity as a shield, hiding the weight of being a black man in a country that still viewed him with suspicion. Behind the shine, there were days when he felt alone, misunderstood, pressured by a society that applauded his talent but criticized him for existing so boldly. He felt the contrast. Inside the ring, he was cheered. Outside, he faced harsh looks, closed doors, and words that tried to diminish his worth. And yet, he continued to dress as if defying fate. There, he understood that every color he chose had the power to provoke. When he wore red suits, he said it was the fire that burned away fear. When he appeared in white, he said it represented purity and peace. When he opted for gold, he reminded the world that its value was non-negotiable. His outfits became an extension of his speech, as powerful as his legendary quotes. He was visual poetry on the world, whether it liked it or not, had to watch. During the 1960s, as his fame exploded, Ali began to be invited to galas, fashion shows, and television interviews. But the most interesting thing is that he never fully fit in, nor did he want to. While the white elite wore discreet ties and gray suits, he appeared in clothes that seemed to dance under the lights. What was a lot for others was just enough for him. And when criticized, he responded with sharp punch-like phrases. "I am who you would want to be if you had the courage." Back then, every public appearance was a mix of performance and protest. He knew that every photo in the newspapers wasn't just about fashion, it was about power. And fashion, in Ali's hands, became a discourse. A silent but devastating discourse. He wore suits like manifestos, and every seam seemed to contain the soul of a man fighting not just against gloved adversaries, but against centuries of oppression. And it was precisely at this moment of ascension, between interviews and stages, that Ali understood a simple truth. Image is a weapon. He could lose a fight, but he would never lose his presence. And this presence became so magnetic that no one dared look away. The boy who dreamed of wearing an expensive suit now had the whole world watching the brilliance of his outfit and the power of his message. If you also believe that greatness is in the details, like subscribe to the channel, and comment below. What is luxury to you, appearance or attitude? Because for Ali, luxury has always been courage. And to help us continue uncovering these real stories and improving the quality of our content, consider purchasing our ebook. You'll find the direct link in the first link in the description. Your support makes all the difference. Muhammad Ali didn't just wear suits to impress, he used them as weapons. When he entered a room, everything stopped. People fell silent, eyes turned, and even the most skeptical critics seemed momentarily disarmed. The brilliance of his clothes wasn't just aesthetic, it was strategy. Every detail, every color choice, every fabric texture was part of a silent war waged outside the ring. He understood that the world judged by appearances, and if he was to be judged, it should be by something he controlled. Thus, he began to shape his own visual narrative, where every scene carried an idea and every color, a provocation. During the 1970s, Ali had become a global icon, and with that, what he wore became as talked about as his fights. At events, he arrived wearing red velvet suits, long elegant coats with wide lapels, gleaming rings on nearly every finger, and gold watches that seemed to defy the light. While other champions kept a low profile, he insisted on being seen. "You may not remember who I beat or lost to," he would say, "but you will remember the man who walked into that room as if he already owned it," and it was true. He commanded the space without needing to speak, with a presence that blended charm, authority, and defiance. Fashion, for him, was an extension of the struggle for civil rights. While America was racked with racial conflict, Ali used his body as a manifesto. He refused to be the neutral athlete, the acceptable black man the system desired. When he wore luxurious fabrics, it wasn't just about vanity, but about freedom. He knew what it meant for a black man to wear silk and gold in a country that said he didn't even deserve respect. And so, each suit was a blow against racism, not with punches, but with style. He proved, day after day, that elegance was also resistant. In a landmark 1971 interview, a journalist asked, "Why do you always dress like a king, Ali?" He looked directly into the camera and replied, "Because the world never wanted to see a black man as a king, and that's exactly what I am." This phrase echoed across the country. It was a symbolic punch, as powerful as any right-handed jab. He knew that every word, every piece of clothing, every movement was part of a larger game, challenging people's perceptions of what was possible, and this perception went far beyond fashion. He inspired young African Americans to see themselves differently. In the ghettos, young men began copying his style, the suits, the polished shoes, the impeccable hair. There, he had become an archetype, the confident, free, elegant, unbreakable black man. And the most impressive thing was that he never had to ask to be imitated. His attitude, in itself, spread. Each public appearance was a lesson in self-esteem and power. He demonstrated that strength lay not only in muscles, but also in the way one presented oneself to the world. Behind the scenes, designers from across the country began studying him. His combinations defied the rules of classic fashion, but made sense within the Ali universe. Boldness, contrast, and charisma. He mixed formal wear with extravagant accessories, breaking the mold, and creating his own aesthetic, blurring the line between boxer and movie star. Many tried to imitate him, but no one could replicate his energy. It was something beyond clothes, it was presence. It was conviction. He could wear a pink suit and still look like the most dangerous man in the room. Over time, his clothes began to tell stories. The white suits symbolized purity, as if a reminder that strength and lightness could coexist. Gold represented victory, the glow of overcoming, the reflection of a man who had overcome prejudice with elegance. And black, which he wore in moments of greater reflection, represented struggle, pain, and resistance. It was as if each color were a chapter of his own biography, woven by fabric. At a dinner in London, one of the biggest fashion houses of the time tried to convince him to adopt a more discreet look. Ali smiled and replied, "Discreet is for those who want to go unnoticed. I didn't come into this world for that." That phrase became legendary among the photographers who accompanied him, because he didn't just talk about fashion, he talked about the right to exist loudly, to occupy spaces previously denied to him. And every time he walked across a room wearing something impossible to ignore, he proved that respect isn't asked for, it's imposed. Style, for Ali, was a way to keep fighting when the gloves were off. And this fight, silent and brilliant, would forever change the way the world viewed not only boxing, but the power of the image. Deep down, he knew the trend would fade, but the message wouldn't, because clothes may age, but courage never goes out of style. As the years passed, Muhammad Ali became something bigger than sport. He was no longer just the invincible boxer. the man who floated like a butterfly and stung like a bee. He was a cultural symbol, an icon who transcended the ring. And, curiously, his influence was not only in the words he spoke or the fights he won, but also in the clothes he wore. That kid from Louisville, who had once dreamed of wearing a tailored suit, was now setting trends worldwide. What had once seemed eccentric had become identity. Fashion, in his hands, was no longer an ornament, it had become a language. In the 1970s, his image dominated magazine covers and advertising campaigns. Renowned brands began vying for the chance to dress him. What had once been an act of rebellion, dressing boldly, was now recognized as style. He appeared at gala events in wide-collared white suits, gold cufflinks and shiny shoes. Everything about him exuded grandeur, but behind every aesthetic choice lay a purpose. Ollie understood that. For the black man, elegance was an act of resistance. The world could try to reduce him, but he chose to elevate himself. His public image was a mirror of his ideology, dignity, pride, and authenticity. In interviews, when asked why he always dressed so extravagantly, he would respond with the calm of someone who knew the weight of his own words. Because I am free, and freedom has to look free. That was it. His clothes weren't just adornments, they were declarations of independence. In a country where prejudice still sewed its invisible threads, he transformed every appearance into a political act. When he stepped onto stages or walked red carpets, his brilliance reflected more than luxury. It reflected struggle. Silken velvet, in Ollie's hands, became tools of affirmation, a way of saying, I am my own man. But time, with its relentless irony, began to test the champion's body. Parkinson's arrived like an invisible, silent enemy, slowly eroding the speed that had once defined him. Many thought his brilliance would diminish, that the elegant, charismatic man would succumb to the weight of the disease. But no. Even with his body weakened, Ali continued to perform with the same dignity, the same well-cut suits, the same calm smile. It was as if elegance had become his last form of resistance. He no longer needed titles, his mere presence was symbol enough. That at a charity event in the late 1990s, with his hands already visibly trembling, Ali appeared in an impeccable navy suit, white shirt, and gold tie. As he walked slowly onto the stage, he received a standing ovation, not out of pity, but out of respect. He still exuded the same magnetism. Each step seemed to say, you can take away my voice, but never my shine. And in that moment, the audience understood what he had always wanted to convey, that true elegance lies not in the clothes, but in the soul that wears them. His suits, now preserved in museums and private collections, are more than fabrics. They are symbols. Each one carries stories of victories, silent protests, and assertions of identity. Contemporary brands still draw inspiration from his bold combinations, vibrant colors, and the contrast between strength and subtlety. Ollie's style spanned generations, influencing rappers, athletes, and artists who found in him a model of aesthetic freedom. Kanye West, Jay-Z, LeBron James all, at some point, cited Muhammad Ali as inspiration, because he taught the world that power can also lie in the way you present yourself, and it's curious how time transforms judgment. What was once seen as arrogance, the world now calls vision. What was once called vanity is now recognized as courage. He was, without realizing it, one of the first to use image as a tool for social transformation. Before social media, before personal branding strategies, Ollie already understood the value of authenticity, and that's what made him unbeatable. He didn't need permission to be himself, he just did. And this freedom, more than any belt, was his greatest legacy. Even after his retirement, Ali's elegance continued to speak for himself. At events, alongside celebrities and politicians, he stood out effortlessly. The colors still accompanied him, but now, the brilliance came from his serene gaze, the eloquent silence of someone who had already said everything he needed to. He was no longer the boy who wanted to be seen. He was the man the world would never forget, because in the end, Muhammad Ali proved that true power lies not in being the strongest, but in being the most authentic. And he was, until his final death, a living portrait of elegance in motion, the perfect fusion of courage and style. And that is why, even today, when a man puts on a suit and feels the weight of his own presence, he, without realizing it, repeats a gesture that Ollie immortalized, that of wearing his dignity like armor. As the years passed, Muhammad Ali became more than a name, he became a symbol. Even when illness limited his movement, his presence remained imposing. He no longer needed to speak loudly or pump his fists. He simply had to be there, and always, on every occasion, he maintained the same care for his appearance, Well-cut suits, elegant colors, a serene gaze. It was as if he were saying to the world, "You can take my strength, but not my style." Fashion, for him, was never about vanity. It was a way to remain whole. Even when his body gave way, each outfit seemed to hold a memory. The struggles, the victories, the protests, the laughter, and even the defeats. And perhaps that's why his style never aged. Because it wasn't just about fabrics or colors, it was about attitude. He had understood that dressing well is an act of that appearance can be a silent banner of dignity. When the public saw him, even in his weakened state, they still saw the same Ali, confident, proud, master of his own destiny. Today, decades after his passing, his legacy still shines. Young artists, athletes, and leaders are inspired by his style. But what they truly strive to emulate is the essence, the courage to be unique. Muhammad Ali proved that true style lies not in clothing, but in character. Because when a man believes in who he is, every step becomes a parade. And when history looks back, it realizes the suit, the color, and the brilliance were merely reflections of what he always was, a king, even without a crown.